By the release of the GameCube and Game Boy Advance, 4-player multiplayer had become commonplace. Since the N64, Nintendo had been pushing 4 players at once in many of its franchises, with most games having some form of multiplayer to take advantage of the 4 controller ports. The next generation also brought in 4-player portable games with the GBA and its 4-way link cable. Mario Kart and Party, Donkey Kong and even Star Fox had some form of multiplayer within their collective franchises by the dawn of the 2000s. So, it was only a matter of time before Nintendo took the concept of a multiplayer Zelda game and made it a reality. Their first attempt was a pack-in title alongside the GBA re-release of A Link to the Past, a multiplayer Zelda simply known as 4 Swords. Up to 4 players could work their way through puzzles and combat in a 2D style Zelda game, both working together and fighting out for the most rupees. A few years later, Nintendo would take the concept to its highest point to this day, with the GameCube's own 4 Swords Adventures. Once again, a top-down Zelda game for up to 4 players to enjoy, but this time with the added twist of a multi-screen system by connecting GBA consoles to the GameCube, thanks to its System Link feature. It's time to enter into a world of accidentally, but really on purpose, throwing your friends off an edge and stealing their rupees, in part 2 of my GameCube and Game Boy Advance generation of The Legend of Zelda. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Pixel Tavern. First off, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's supported the channel over the last 6 or so years. It's recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you all enough. The next milestone I need to hit is 4,000 watch hours over the course of a year, so if you have any spare time and you enjoy watching my videos, please check out as many of them as you can in order to help the channel reach its next big milestone. Anyway, it's down to a little bit of business. So, last video, I said that Wind Waker was the 9th game in the series, and Minish Cap was the 10th. Well, I got that wrong. Actually, Link to the Past with 4 Swords is the 9th game in the series, making Wind Waker the 10th. And 4 Swords Adventures is the 11th game in the series, making Minish Cap the 12th. So, the last video should technically have been 4 Swords followed by Wind Waker, and this video should have been 4 Swords Adventures followed by Minish Cap. But too late now. Anyway, it's on to part 6 of my Zelda adventure as I move on to the multiplayer mayhem of 4 Swords and 4 Swords Adventures. Nope. Hey, what's the screen moving? Nope. 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 Why hello there, Phil. Why hello there, Phil. Yeah. Yeah. Use your words, Red. Alright, fine. Here's my regular words. Hello, Purple here. Oh, hey there, Purple. That's a good reason as well. Nice. Wonder what that's referencing. Wait a minute. Why is there 4 of me? I only played this 2-player. I mean, quite frankly, I don't really have the budget or even the space to do this, and when I tried to do it split screen, I mean, Christ. Look, Purple and Red, can you guys, I don't know, be gone, or however it is I get rid of you guys? That'll work. Oh, okay. Right, back to normal. Blue, you're still here. Yeah, I mean, we did it 2 players. Well, I guess it was 2 players, so why not? It's now time to jump in to 4 Swords. The first in the series to be entirely multiplayer focused, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords was more of a bonus add-on than a fully fledged game. Originally released for the Game Boy Advance as part of the Link to the Past re-release, kind of remaster, on December 2nd, 2002, the game sadly does have a pretty big playability flaw. It's only playable with at least 2 people, and since this was the GBA era, it didn't even have online play to make up for it. So if you grew up in the UK, amongst very few Nintendo fans, like I did, you had hardly anyone to play it with. Thankfully, on September 28, 2011, nearly a decade and 2 generations of console later, Nintendo released the 4 Swords Anniversary Edition, a free download for the Nintendo 3DS and DSi with additional content and the ability to play solo. The downside? Well, unless you downloaded it in the 6 months it was available, you have to hack your console in order to get it. So annoyingly, not many people have this version of the game, and with no online multiplayer still, it's pretty difficult to get people together to play. However, if you can, even with just 2 people or by yourself, it's still a lot of fun to play.
I first played this alongside a friend with my Link to the Past GBA copy. I think we played it for maybe one level, and we just never got around to playing it again. With the Anniversary Edition, me and another friend managed to finish the entire game, including the additional content that version was blessed with, which is the version I'm covering in this video. Since the game is more focused on replayability, it doesn't have that many levels. Well, sort of. On face value, the game has 4 main areas and a training area, which is what the original game had as well. The Anniversary version adds 2 more to the collection, one of which is the Hero's Trial mode, which contains extra difficult levels to work through. These don't mess around either. These are some of the most difficult segments of any Zelda game out there. Nothing as agonizing as Zelda 2, but still pretty damn tough. The other area it adds is by far the best in the game, the Realm of Memories. It contains 3 levels, each based on a classic Zelda game. With faithful map recreations and fun Easter eggs, these are the most fun areas to play. So overall, 6 areas is not really that much, and if you're going to play through each level just once, it's only going to take you a few hours to beat, with the average level length being anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes. What can give the game some longevity though, is that some of the areas are randomized, meaning every time you enter these areas, they will be changed around a bit. Nothing major, but enough that if you and a few friends really enjoyed the game, there is enough here to keep you replaying for a couple of dozen hours or so. Gameplay-wise, this is a pretty strong first outing of multiplayer for Zelda. Up to 4 players each control a mechanically identical Link, and you work your way through enemies and puzzles in the classic top-down Zelda style. This time though, most of the puzzles are themed around utilizing each player, or at the very least 2 of them. For example, there are enemies that can only be killed when one player throws them to another to attack, or another where 2 players must stand either side of the enemy and brutally pull them apart. Puzzle-wise, there are moments where players have to split up in order to progress through an area, such as creating a bridge for another player to run across, or multiple buttons and blocks that can only be activated or moved when all players are present. One thing that keeps the level design interesting is how this game handles its items. In traditional Zelda fashion, there are several items in the game, such as bombs, bows, boomerangs, and more. Whereas normally you would collect and keep them as you progress, instead, here you can collect one at a time and swap them out at designated areas. It works to mix up the gameplay as you frequently have to swap items to progress, and since each Link can carry a different item, everyone can have a designated role in puzzle progression and boss fights. It's a well-utilised system that keeps the game interesting throughout. All of this is also playable single player with the Anniversary Edition of the game, where you control 2 Links and can switch between them at any time. It works pretty smoothly, and it's a welcome addition to the game for any solo players wanting to enjoy. Alongside the puzzles, enemies and combat are generally fun and interesting as well, with the difficulty of them either being working out the trick to bring them down, or being sheer numbers, with waves of enemies attacking you all at once. Bosses are also somewhat unique here as well, with each boss fight requiring some form of cooperation to defeat them, such as bouncing back magic with a specific colour Link, or having to hit an enemy from different angles with different Links. The main villain this time is Vati, 2 years before he would appear in Minish Cap and 4 Swords Adventures. However, he's more just an end goal than an actual presence in the game, as 4 Swords is the most bare-bones Zelda game in terms of its story. I can't even cut a long story short, because the story of the game is literally Link picks up the Force Sword and gets split into 4 in order to defeat Vati. Bear in mind this was an add-on game for the GBA version of A Link to the Past, so very little story should be expected here. There is technically more, which even has some connections to Minish Cap and 4 Swords Adventures, but nothing substantial enough to mention. There aren't any NPCs here, or any world building either. The levels are just there to be functional, rather than for any artistic purpose. That brings us nicely into the presentation. And well, it's not really anything special. Some of the music tracks are actually pretty annoying in my opinion, as they have very short repetition cycles for a lot of them. Especially the Chambers of Insight track was just drilled into my mind for days. The tracks are okay otherwise, but nothing really memorable here, at least for the right reasons. The composer Yuko Takahara has some good credits to their name, so it doesn't seem that the composer is at fault here. I'm guessing it's more likely to be the cartridge space limitations, which would explain why the tracks loop so frequently. Graphically, it's also just okay, kind of a basic version of what Minish Cap would be later, with more cartoony versions of Link and a somewhat colourful world. Everything does just look a bit bland though, once again not really giving off anything memorable. It's not that it's bad, it's just in terms of other Zelda games up to this point, it wasn't anything special. Overall, 4 Swords is a pretty enjoyable time. By yourself, it can feel basically like a bite-sized Zelda experience, with levels instead of dungeons breaking up the gameplay and a focus around controlling 2 links. With a few extra players though, it's much more interesting, mixing cooperation and friendly hijinks in the battle to collect more rupees and defeat more enemies. It doesn't have the best of pacing, with some levels being too short and others being too long, but overall, it works pretty well. It set Zelda up for a fun multiplayer future that sadly, Nintendo has not really capitalized on. Hopefully, they will in the future. But they did thankfully create one much more impressive and ambitious sequel, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures. Released on the 18th of March 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube, this is in my opinion still the best multiplayer Zelda game, and just a great multiplayer game in general. This was one of the few games for the system that used the GBA as a full controller, meaning it does play pretty much the same as the original 4 Swords. But everything feels much larger in scope, and the overall gameplay was refined to become a much more enjoyable experience. This is probably due to the fact that it was a fully fledged Zelda game this time around. I first bought and played it sometime around 2008. It was one of the last games I picked up from my local video game store before they shut for good, when the game brand stores started to become big in the UK. I remember seeing it on the shelf, knowing nothing about it beyond the fact it was multiplayer. I bought it on a whim, jumped straight into the single player, and loved it pretty much straight away. The first thing that grabbed me was the presentation. From the get-go, you are presented with a basic but eye and ear-catching title screen. It lets off a Link to the Past style vibe with its stormy background and its slower-paced rendition of the Legend of Zelda theme. Technically, the GameCube is the most high-powered console to have an original pixel-style Zelda game, and the developers took full advantage of that. By combining 3D and 2D objects, you get a unique look to the game that mixes Wind Waker and Link to the Past into a coherent style. Explosions, fire, water, and other elements and mechanics look great here. With a slightly cartoony and bolder look than the rest of the game, they stand out in just the right way. The music is great here too, with a mix of entirely new and remakes of older tracks packing out a good-sized soundtrack that gives off vibes of several Zelda games. Composed once again by the incredible Koji Kondo alongside Asuko Ota, the soundtrack is particularly strong, mixing classic Zelda-style music with a few more modern sounds. As of this recording, it showcases the last time a mainline Zelda title used a more classic retro style for its music. It would be great to see a new mainline pixel-style Zelda one day, especially after how amazing the spin-off title, Cadence of Hyrule for the Switch, looks and sounds. Although it boasts a strong presentation, the story is still pretty basic. The seal around Vati's imprisonment within the 4 Sword is weakening, so Link and Zelda visit the shrine of the 4 Sword to check in, only to discover that a Shadow Link is causing problems. Link takes the 4 Sword, splitting him into 4 in order to defeat him, but he releases Vati in doing so. Vati captures Zelda and the 6 Shrine Maidens and imprisons them around Hyrule. The Links travel around to free them, but on the way discover that the Demon King Ganon has been behind everything, and created Shadow Link using the Dark Mirror to trick him into releasing Vati. After the 4 Links save Zelda, the 6 Maidens, and 4 mysterious knights, they defeat Vati and Ganondorf. The end. It's better than 4 Swords on the GBA, but it's still not to the same standard or quality as other Zelda titles. Moving on to the gameplay, let's start where I did, with the single player. Nintendo made sure to make this into a fun experience, regardless of the number of players present. Unlike with the original 4 Swords, this one has a full single player mode. You can play with a GBA or a GameCube controller when playing by yourself, and when you enter into caves, a virtual GBA pops up on screen, allowing you to still see above and below to solve some of the game's screen-crossing puzzles. Speaking of the puzzles, 4 Swords Adventures shines in this aspect. Whether playing alone or with friends, the puzzles are intricate and fun to solve most of the time, and show a lot of creativity from the developers. Some areas of the game even change slightly to accommodate one player, allowing the developers to go a bit more experimental with them for the multiplayer. For example, in the multiplayer, each player can carry a different item, but in the single player, where you control all 4 Links collectively, you can only carry one. As such, there had to be changes to accommodate that. There are some bonuses to playing alone though. With the single player, a cool feature you do get is formations. You can swap the 4 Links into 4 different positions in order to best tackle puzzles and enemies. You can also separate them out for better positioning against bosses or for puzzles. If you combine them together though, it does multiply your attack power, so there is a little strategy to the combat here that is wholly unique to this game, and does change slightly in the multiplayer. Playing alone or with friends does give 2 slightly different experiences, and I would say it's worth experiencing both. How about the multiplayer though? Well, this was my first time playing it through with another person. Me and my partner Katie played through the whole game, each controlling 2 Links. I've been playing Zelda games for around 2 decades now, whereas this is her first top-down Zelda game, so there was a lot of, shall we say, frustrating moments. There were situations where the puzzle or action was completely obvious to me, but to her was damn near impossible. Despite the fact that she has platinumed every From Software game available, she struggled to avoid spotlights, avoid bombs, or just pay attention to things that seemed completely obvious to me. It really goes to show how 2 people can be good at games, but depending on your history with them, you may find some things so much more difficult than others. Zelda is very good at homaging its own puzzles from previous games, so I of course know them all pretty well, whereas Katie is seeing them for the first time, and it really shows how these puzzles can be very intricate and even confusing to new players. It was genuinely one of the most interesting playthroughs of a game with another person I think I've ever experienced, and not just because of the game itself. But I digress. The multiplayer here is pretty damn amazing. It's in my opinion still the best multiplayer Zelda experience available, with great level design, mostly inspired by A Link to the Past, but with some unique additions and twists that mix up the gameplay. Like with the original 4 Swords, the game is split up into levels. However, this time there's a lot more, with 8 worlds with 3 levels each, making for around 15 hours of playtime. Each world consists of a more open area leading up to the second level, which is generally a dungeon with a mini-boss. And the third level is a mix of the 2, leading to the main boss for that area. The structure works pretty well, giving you a traditional Zelda feel and a more digestible style for multiplayer. The pacing of the game though does leave something to be desired at times. Most levels will take you maybe between 20 and 30 minutes, but there are a few that just seem to go on forever, lasting upwards of an hour or more with no way of saving mid-level and returning to it. Nintendo's tutorialization of its games also rears its ugly head here, where you get repeatedly reminded that Force Gem colors are worth X amount, and repeatedly get stopped to show off that you've collected certain ones. I have to say it does harm the experience at times, making some levels more frustrating than enjoyable, and the collection of large amounts of Force Gems can be very annoying. Overall, it does flow reasonably well from start to finish, but it definitely needed more trimming down within some levels, and for Nintendo to just trust its players to remember basic information about the game's mechanics. There are also a few levels that are just too puzzle-focused. One level in particular is a riddle-like puzzle where you have to interact with multiple characters in multiple areas across multiple screens. It ends up with one player just kind of waiting around with nothing to do, while the other player talks to people. There's hardly any enemies and not really any side quests for them to do. It's long, it's tedious, and ultimately it drags out the playtime artificially, leading to a level I never want to have to repeat. But thankfully, there's only a few of these in the game. The variety of mechanics on show here make for fun moments, such as discovering that fire spreads across the grass for the first time in the series, or the best use of the dual world mechanic seen in other Zelda titles. Here, when you enter into the mirror world, you switch over to the GBA screen, but you can still interact with the main world on the TV screen, such as picking up other players to cross over gaps, or being able to move objects between dimensions. It's a great use of the dual worlds mechanic that would have fit perfectly with the 3DS or DS games, but was sadly never used outside of this title. There are several items in the game that are also used pretty well, and like with 4 Swords, they are swapped out frequently across the game to help give puzzles more variety, and to give you different options in combat. Speaking of the combat, it's in my opinion the best for a classic style Zelda game. In single player, utilizing the 4 links available to you is crucial in defeating bosses, and whether you're playing single or multiplayer, fighting huge hordes of enemies is always exciting and fun. It even has a slight competitive option of counting up the total number of kills per player, which leads to a final score at the end of each level to decide the victor. I also really enjoyed a lot of the bosses in this game. A lot of them do a great job of utilizing the features of the game itself, especially the GBA screen. It allows for battles that cross multiple screens, and most of them require you to work together with other players to take them down. All of this while still being fun for a single player experience as well. Playing multiplayer also has a few other perks, other than of course just having someone else to play the game with. First off, fighting for the triangular rupee style money known as Force Gems is a lot more fun here than the original 4 Swords, as huge amounts of Force Gems are thrown out to fight over. And if you're not quick enough, that sneaky little sod Tingle likes to show up out of nowhere and try to steal them. Secondly, each world has a fun minigame ran by the man himself, Tingle, such as horseback racing, puzzle games, combat games, and more that cannot be played in single player. And there is also the side game Shadow Battle, where Link can literally fight amongst themselves. There is not much to it in 2 players, but I imagine 4 players would have a great time here. In the Japanese version of the game, there is even a fully voice-acted side game called Tetra's Trackers, which you could actually play single player. I tried it out, I had no idea what was happening, but it seemed fun enough, even if Tetra would just not stop yelling at me. So there are clearly a lot of clever design ideas put into the game, which makes it an even bigger shame that it is still locked to the GameCube, and to a very expensive way to do multiplayer. Each player needs a GBA and a link cable to join in, and considering how expensive GBAs can be on the second-hand market, and not many people have a GameCube anymore, the multiplayer is sadly tough to organise a group around. It's a great idea, but in practice, it's just too messy and expensive to play, especially when it launched. In the early 2000s, GBAs cost around £100 each, a link cable cost you around £15, and the game was around about £40. Top all that off with the GameCube at around £120, and you are looking at around £600 or more to play this game to the fullest during its release. Even now, you'd be looking at over £300 to get the consoles, the game, and everything you need off the second-hand market to play this as intended. With these costs in mind, despite owning this game, a system to play it on, and all the accessories, and even the Japanese version of the game, as you can see, I used the Dolphin emulator for this playthrough, which loses some of the fun factor of having your own screen in hand. This game can and should have been ported to the Wii U, or as a much more financially sensible idea, to the Nintendo Switch, but it looks unlikely to happen and has sadly become a bit of a forgotten gem in the Zelda pantheon of games. Overall though, Four Swords Adventures, whether you have to play through an emulator or you can actually get all of this madness together to play, it's still a fantastic time. Whether it's multiplayer or single, this is a Zelda title every fan should play, and one that definitely needs another chance in the spotlight with a modern remake. It's unlikely to happen, but hey.
Oh, a man can dream, though. A man can dream.
Well, that's it for part 6, and I guess the end of the Game Boy Advance and GameCube generation. Hey, wasn't I wearing green as the real version of me before? Am I the real Phil now? Oh well, it's been a year since I started this series now, almost to the day. I did originally plan to have all these out before Tears of the Kingdom, but that was probably pretty wishful thinking. It's probably going to take me about another year to finish this off, so I hope you all like Zelda content, because this is what I'm going to be doing for quite a bit more time. Anyway, Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures are 2 fantastic games. Multiplayer-wise, they're 2 of the best available, and by yourself, they're still a great Zelda experience. Four Swords Adventures is definitely the better game though. It's just much more polished and has so much more content, and it's got a lot more replay value too. I even got the Japanese version of Four Swords Adventures just so I could round out my collection with that Tetra's Trackers exclusive mode. Anyway, it's time to move on to the 13th game in the series, where it gets a little bit serious, a little bit dark, and a whole lot moody, as we move on to...
one of the most hyped games in history. Spanning a long development period and 2 consoles, we move on to the moody teens with Zelda's 13th title, Twilight Princess, where the series fully embraced the terrible colour schemes of the mid-2000s and started the revolution of the Wii. There is also the sequel to the Wind Waker to cover, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, the first of 2 games for the DS, and the first fully touchscreen controlled game in the series. Next time it's part 1 of the Wii and DS generation of The Legend of Zelda. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Phil, and I'm the creator of the Pixel Tavern. I have to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel since it began. Since the last video, it has finally hit 1,000 subscribers, which is a great milestone to reach, and I cannot thank you all enough. Now, I have to push for 4,000 watch hours, so please check out as many of my videos as possible to support me and help me grow the channel. If you like this video, please click the like button, subscribe if you are not already, and click the bell icon to be notified of any new videos. Also leave a comment on any memories you have of these 2 games. Which is your favourite of the 2? Would you want a remake of them? Or do you want to see an entirely new multiplayer Zelda? As always, if you want to see more, there are more videos on screen now. Till the next video everyone, thank you very much for watching.